All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick. It's Wyndham Clark's world, but today we're going to talk about some NFL divisions within Wyndham's world. We're going to do this every Monday for the next 8 weeks, little division preview, talking about all the odds associated with each team, any award looks, win total over-unders, etc. And then at the end of today's show, we're also going to talk some NBA draft. But Drew, how are you? How was your weekend?
It was great. Beautiful weekend. A little tired. The golf didn't end till like 8 o'clock last night here on the West Coast. So, it was a late night. No, I'm making a joke, guys. I feel for the East Coasters, like yourself. Yeah, that was those long days. West Coast US Open's always kind of interesting. I thought overall it was a great experience. I'm excited for Wyndham Clark. I didn't win any money, but that said, it was cool to see somebody hit that career milestone. Coming in with such incredible form and being able to carry it for four rounds like that, and not crack under the pressure of Rory McIlroy knocking on the door, and Scotty Scheffler on Saturday hitting those shots at the end. You think those types of world's best coming at you down the stretch, and there's potential for chokage. And Wyndham Clark said, no, not today, not here. This is my tournament, and that's cool.
Yeah, I still don't know how his drive on the 18th landed on the fairway, but the fact that looked like it was completely gone, but I guess he had 58 yards to work with side to side, and he needed every last one of them. And then, the first putt on 18, that was the shot. So took a fair bit of steel from Wyndham to close that one out. He was, I think at one point, really late in the piece, he got into like minus 2,500 or something, and then when he bogeyed late and it got out to like minus 150 again, and it really felt like he was going to blow it, but he didn't. So credit to him, 80 to 1, 100 to 1 before the tournament. So congrats to anyone who had that ticket. I did not. Let's try and find some other tickets in the AFC East, which is an absolute behemoth of a division. You got 3 of the AFC title favorites in the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins, and then the Patriots as well, who are maybe the most nondescript team in the league. We'll see if there's any angles on them. Let's start with the Bills, who are the favorite, plus 130 to win the division. They are 8 to 1 to win the Super Bowl. It feels like not that long ago they were, 6-point favorites home to Cincinnati in the second week of the AFC playoffs, and then that obviously didn't go so well for Buffalo. Their win total is 10.5 backed over. And I think the key thing with the AFC East to remember as we talk about all these teams and why I guess maybe these win totals might seem a little bit low on face value is that these teams have absolutely brutal schedules. The 2 divisions that the AFC East teams have to play are the AFC West, which has Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert in it, and the NFC East, which is also a loaded division. So there's just no real respite. When we talk about the Atlanta Falcons at some point and run through their schedule compared to what the Bills, Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots are going to have to face, it's just a different world. Any angles into betting the Bills, either pro or con?
I'm Bills neutral, but I'm leaning Bills con. And it's not for good reasons. It's a lot of kind of around the edges stuff. Last year, it was pretty obvious that if and I took positions on the Bills, particularly Josh Allen MVP early, because they had one of the easier routes to a top seed in a very crowded AFC. And you knew that coming off of what was such a superlative playoff performance that ultimately did not end in the Super Bowl, that if they could replicate that form early in the season, the market was just going to run away on the Bills. And so you needed to have, plant your flag early if you were going to believe that the Bills had a chance. And for a while last season, it looked like they did. They were the best team power rating wise for at least half the year for me. And then, Josh Allen hurts his elbow and the rest is history, as they never really capture that form again for the months of December and January. And, the disappointing playoff performance against the Dolphins, which they ultimately won, followed by a disappointing playoff performance against the Bengals, where they got pushed around at home in Bills weather, was a pretty suspect way to end their season. I don't really love any of the roster moves that they made in the offseason. Nothing that they did really says that they understand what their deficiencies are as a team. They're lacking a little bit of youth because they've been picking at the end of the draft for so many years, and they've been swinging on some positions that maybe don't matter as much, and they haven't necessarily been connecting. And so it all of a sudden looks like a roster that's somewhat fragile to me. A lot of the most important players are getting up there in their 20s, some in their 30s, and now they don't have a defensive coordinator, and the pressure is on Sean McDermott to perform this year. And if the offense sputters, we already know that the offensive coordinator, who I like, and Ken Dorsey, is going to be immediately under fire. You could see a situation where there's some pressure and some turnover here pretty early, and that this could kind of unwind the team that has a much more difficult schedule this year and a much more difficult division, as you mentioned. I think even though you're not looking at the same quality of quarterback as you have in, say, the AFC North or the AFC West, it's still this is the toughest division in the NFL by my numbers. And it's just because there's no easy win at all. Everything's going to be hard fought. And so I would lean under 10.5 if you're going to give me plus money, but I'm going to wait and hold and see what kind of alt numbers we get, because if it doesn't go well for the Bills, if Josh Allen, sustains another injury, they could put him on ice and really just kind of try to recoup for next year with the new coach, with the new vision. And I don't think that's out of the question in terms of the realm of possibilities for the Bills this year. What is your temperature on this team?
Yeah, I wonder how much of our perception of the Bills is skewed by just how disastrous that one Cincinnati playoff game was. And the fact that, it was just a weird game. It was in the snow. I think the snow really helped Cincinnati, and the Bengals offensive line was so incredibly banged up. And I do think the snow neutralized Buffalo's pass rush. Now, I don't think the snow is enough to forgive that they just seem to have no offensive game plan whatsoever. And they just seem to have no theory. And a lot of the times, Buffalo's offense last year seemed to devolve into handing Josh Allen his Superman cape and hoping that he can fly. And there wasn't nearly as much precision as you'd see, obviously, in like an Andy Reid offense or something. So I think they've got some things to sort out on that front. At the same time, this team was Super Bowl favorite with 2 weeks to go in the AFC playoffs, and most of the talent is still there. I do think a sneaky thing with Buffalo as well is that it came out after the season that Gabe Davis had a high ankle sprain in week 2, and then he just played through it. And he was expected, everyone thought about his ridiculous performance against Kansas City in the playoffs the year before, and he was everyone's favorite fantasy sleeper coming into the season, and it just never happened for him last year. And you have to think a lot of that is just playing through that high ankle sprain. He should theoretically be healthier. Dalton Kincaid comes in, 30-1 offensive rookie of the year. They're bringing back most of the defense. You get hopefully a full year of Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And I just think that there is a ton of upside. I kind of hope that the Bills lose in week 1 on Monday Night Football at the Jets. And there's an overreaction to their Super Bowl price and AFC price. So that might be the look in. Currently, I don't think there's a huge amount of appealing bets on the board in terms of futures outrights. The one, I think, most interesting awards market is Damar Hamlin and Comeback Player of the Year, which is still a strange one to talk about. But I think we're kind of on opposite sides of the fence here, where I think that, if he suits up, I think it's pretty much all over. And the moment he takes a snap, that he'll win that award, and he's in the minus 250 range. But I think you think that there might be a little bit more variance, and maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I kind of will, believe it when I see it that they really intend to put him on the field.
Sure.
It's a very cool story. Obviously, I'm very, very happy that we're talking about this as a possibility as opposed to what the other reality was. But at the end of the day, I don't have a stomach to watch him play football.
Yeah.
I don't want to see something happen. And it's not to say that I'm an medical expert and I know that there's an more inherent risk having seen what has happened once, but they treated their offseason like they needed to bolster the position of safety, even though they have Poyer and Hyde playing this year. Like, they went out and got additional pieces. Right now, Damar Hamlin third on the depth chart for strong safety. So I don't know that we're going to see him a ton this season, and I think that's probably fine. And I want him to have a healthy rest of his life and pursue endeavors that make him happy. But I don't know that that's going to be professional football.
Yep. No, I think that makes sense. And yeah, it's a strange market. I don't really know how everyone is going to treat it, but I think it's something where if he does play and he takes a snap, we're going to know straight away if that award is done based on the reaction. But let's talk about My New York Jets, with Sauce Gardner hanging behind me from the wall, their win total is 9.5, slightly backed over, minus 134 to make the playoffs, plus 250 to win the AFC East, and 16-1 to win the Super Bowl. Obviously, they bring in Aaron Rodgers, who's a material upgrade over the range of quarterbacks that they had last year between Zach Wilson, Mike White, Joe Flacco, the great Strevler, and co. I always worry about a team like the Jets that is so built upon an elite top 5 defense, just because defense fluctuates a lot more than offense year to year, just more turnover dependent. At the same time, they've kind of mitigated that somewhat by getting Aaron Rodgers on the other side of the ball. So where do you land on the Jets?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult handicap for the Jets in a lot of ways. And the main reason is what we saw from Aaron Rodgers last year was top 20 quarterback performance, coming off of 2 years where he was, basically the clear choice MVP. And that's, that obviously has alarm bells ringing in the back of your head that, the aging curve is crashing down on him and he doesn't have an elite level, and that the best that he could expect is to be the second best quarterback in this division this year. And if that's what he ends up achieving, if he has top 10 EPA per play type of numbers this year on a Jets team that has some unique weapons on offense, but a suspect offensive line and a suspect offensive coordinator, then the Jets are going to the playoffs. They're going to absolutely be in the mix for, an AFC East title, but it's entirely contingent upon Aaron Rodgers getting to top 10 level, which I need to kind of see to believe. The defense, on the other hand, I feel there are very few defenses in the NFL that I would say I have relatively high confidence we're going to see them as a top 5 defense at the end of the year. The Jets are absolutely one of them. This defense is loaded. The talent, particularly in the front seven, is it's deep. It's unquestionable. I think Quinnen Williams is a breakout superstar going forward in the, kind of in the mold of an Aaron Donald, anchoring the interior of that defensive line. They have wave after wave of pass rusher, which is, of course, how Robert Saleh succeeded in the San Francisco 49ers defense. So I think this is going to be a violent pass rush. I think they're going to be able to put away games with this pass rush if they have leads. And I think the contributions you're getting from your back end, particularly with Sauce Gardner being one of the best, if not the best, cornerbacks in the NFL right now, is going to be lockdown, play that's going to prevent comebacks from other teams. So it's, realistically, I think this defense is going to be as good as advertised. I think Saleh may find himself under some pressure if the Jets aren't winning. And that, to the degree he can affect anything, it's going to be kind of doubling down on, unique scheme and really kind of getting wins by the way of the defense. So it's, to me at least, this is it's a little bit of a question mark still for me about how Aaron Rodgers fits, particularly with some of the questions on the offensive line and him being a little bit of a sitting duck at times, considering this unit and how the Hackett offense was trying to run last year in Denver. If it looks anything like that, then this is going to be a Jets team that's winning ugly. It looks like a team that I'm probably looking at betting some unders, not for win total, but in game by game as we go through the first portion of the season here. And I would expect that if and when Rodgers does get continuity with this group, does find comfort in the offense, it's probably not going to be till later in the season. So I really don't see any need to go run and bet and stockpile Jets futures now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you look at the first 6 weeks of their schedule, home to Buffalo Monday night, the opening week, at Dallas, home to New England, home to Kansas City, at Denver, home to Philadelphia, going into their bye week. And I think that the difficulty of that schedule perhaps gets maximized by the fact that, Rodgers won't have that level of continuity. So again, I think that's something like Buffalo, where you almost hope that they start poorly 2-4, and that then the market overreacts to some outright prices at that point. But yeah, I don't see much reason to bet the Jets at this point. And to your point about Rodgers, I mean, last year he was 20th in EPA per play among quarterbacks, behind some great names like Andy Dalton and Marcus Mariota. So that's the EPA and completion percentage over expected composite, but that's not great company to keep. And he did have the injury that he was dealing with toward his thumb, and then also just the fact that Green Bay receiving core wasn't, what it was. It's still dealing with the absence of Devontae Adams. As Christian Watson emerged, he looked a lot better, and he did look better towards the end of the season, but still hard to shake the image of him just throwing interceptions to Aiden Hutchinson over and over again for fun. So some questions to be asked there. In terms of awards, I don't think there's much that's super appealing, certainly on the offensive side of the ball. I think Robert Saleh has been a name thrown around for Coach of the Year. I didn't see that really at all because Rodgers will just get the credit. I think they probably have to be like a 1 seed for Robert Saleh to win that award, or go 15-2, 14-3. So nothing super appealing there. They do have 2 Defensive Player of the Year candidates, though, in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. And I think you like Quinnen Williams.
Yeah, I mean, bet price mostly, right? Like he was, at least by my metrics, Quinnen Williams was the 5th most valuable defensive player in all of football last year. And if you look at his career projection, he took a humongous leap forward in terms of, what he brings to the defense as a whole. The defense is unquestionably one of the most talented rosters in the NFL, in my opinion. And he is the anchor. He's going to get a ton of the credit for it. He's going to get a ton of the counting stats because of the pressure he brings up the middle. And Sauce Gardner, while a better player and probably better at his position, they just across the NFL, just less likely to get the credit because teams, I think, are going to have to throw away from him. So if you can get anything in the kind of 30-1 range for Quinnen Williams, I think that's a fair play. But it's again, the only thing that I would have high confidence with this Jets team is that the defense lands in the top 5, and it's because of the talent. And Quinnen Williams is a huge reason why.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think that with Sauce, he's an interesting one in that, like, this award, Defensive Player of the Year, is just so much about reputation. And I think that Sauce Gardner does have the reputation, but he's going to need some interceptions. And he only had 2 last year. I think he needs like 6, 7, and to have a team that's clearly a playoff team and that is regarded as clearly the best defense in the league. That's the path that Stephon Gilmore took to winning it in 2019. I think Sauce could take that path, but I mean, at the current prices, he's in the 11-1 range. Like, that's just no bet at those kind of numbers. Let's go to the Miami Dolphins. Win total 9.5 plus 290 to win the division. 25-1 to win the Super Bowl. And I think I'm a lot more bullish on the Dolphins than most people in the market. I think this team has ridiculous amount of talent and upside, getting Jalen Ramsey in. Just the top end talent on the team, between Hill and Waddle being the best receiving duo, between Ramsey and Xavier Howard, who was banged up all of last season. The offensive line is a question mark, but again, you're adding a lot of upside. If Teron Armstead can just be healthy for 85% of the season, then that looks a lot better. And then Tua, who, I mean, has just an incredibly wide range of outcomes as a quarterback. Like, I think he is someone who, I would not be shocked if Tua won MVP this year, but also not be shocked if he's just out of the league. And so there's just a massive range of outcomes. Obviously, hope that he is able to play and stay healthy. But I mean, people forget, like, he was the 3rd favorite for MVP for a stretch late in the season. And then it all largely fell apart. But what do you make of the Dolphins?
Yeah, I completely agree with your take. It's a team that has a ceiling that is Super Bowl champion, and it has a floor that is, who's our quarterback next year. And that's crazy. I think betting into an over under 9.5 flat minus 110 either side, that this is one of those over unders that I was say, yep, perfect. Put it right there. Let people decide. But I almost think it's not worth making that bet, because I would rather have over 10.5 or under 8.5 because of what you described in terms of the range of outcomes here. Injury with the quarterback position is an enormous question mark, and you do not want to be entering the season with those questions. It's worth noting that they made one of the more kind of they made one of the more meaningful coordinator hires in the offseason. The Miami Dolphins, of course, bring in Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, who is a decent upgrade, and he has a lot to work with. This is a really, really talented defense, not quite as good of a score for me as the Jets, just because they don't have the cornerbacks are getting a little bit up there. Xavier Howard, Jalen Ramsey, definitely not spring chickens. But that said, they have elite pass rush, and in the scheme, I'm expecting, with a year off, Vic Fangio is going to have some interesting wrinkles. So this is a team that ought to be able to win multiple ways, even if the offense isn't entirely clicking at times. And I think that's kind of the biggest question that they need to answer for me. We came down the end of last season, and it could have been because of injury. It could have been because of quarterback availability, but certainly by eye, the physicality that cornerbacks brought to the smallish receivers, I guess, with Hill and Waddle was apparently effective. San Francisco did it. The Chargers did it. And to the degree that teams look at that tape, and that is plan A to defend this team this year, they better have an answer. And so, I'm curious to see what Mike McDaniel brings. I like him as a coach. I like him as a visionary. And I think he can, second year under his system, this is a team that should take a step forward. So I'm with you. If if things go well, you want to have a Dolphins, Super Bowl ticket in pocket, AFC ticket in pocket, because they're going to exceed by margin. It's the problem is, if they don't continue to innovate offense, and if something happens to Tua from a health standpoint, then the next thing you know, you're cheering for Mike White to get you to 10 wins, and you're feeling a little nervous about it.
Indeed, yeah. I think the one thing with Miami is I always come back and think about that Sunday night game they had against the Chargers towards the end of last season, where they lost 23-17, and Tua just looked awful in that game, and it looked like Miami's offense had largely been solved. And I mean, it was just an uneven year last year. They had a ton of injuries. To your point about the receivers, like Tyreek Hill was banged up all the last 4 or 5 weeks of last year, which probably cost him Offensive Player of the Year. So I think, there's definitely some downside. There's also massive upside. If I was going to bet on 3 teams in the AFC outside of the big 3 of Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati, I would have probably the Dolphins top of the list, along with the Ravens, and then I think Cleveland would be the long shot. We'll talk about those latter 2 teams when we talk AFC North. But in terms of awards pricing, I do think there are some interesting bets here. We talked with Ahmed and Chris Sims last week about Mike McDaniel and Coach of the Year. He's 20-1. He's the type of guy where, with Coach of the Year, just looking at guys who will get the credit if they have a resume that's deserving. So like Mike McCarthy, if the Cowboys go 14-3, like he's just not going to get the credit because he's like Doc Rivers of the NFL. But Mike McDaniel, like if the Dolphins win the division and they're the 1 seed, then he just wins. Like he just wins Coach of the Year, barring a massive outlier. And he's 20-1 to win Coach of the Year. I wish they had a slightly easier schedule, but I still think there's some meat on the bone there. Tyreek Hill, 18-1 Offensive Player of the Year, when you think that he probably would have won or been a coin flip to win if he just stayed healthy down the back end of last season and he had Tua as his quarterback all season. I think that's somewhat interesting. And then the one that I bet the most is Jalen Phillips, Defensive Player of the Year. I bet that at 200-1 and 150-1. If you get anything close to 100-1, I think that's value, because he was, like, I think a lot of people don't even know who Jalen Phillips is. He's not, he's not a Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett household name yet, but he was 18th pick in the draft a couple of years ago. He was 6th in the NFL in pressures last season as a second-year player. Like, he has a ton of upside, and playing opposite Bradley Chubb, I think that that will free him up to have more clean runs at the quarterback. But
playing next to Christian Wilkins too. That matters. He's great. It's a good defensive line, and I would imagine that Vic Fangio is excited to work with this group, and that Jalen Phillips is sort of the beneficiary of all of the unique ways that they're going to find to make quarterback lives difficult. That's a great bet. The prices you got are outstanding. And I mean, if you can find still numbers like that, I would put one in your pocket. And again, like, this is sort of the underlying theme. The Dolphins, you want to swing for the wild outlier stuff, because if it does click, just like you said, like, you want I would what would I rather have over 9.5 wins at -110, or would I rather have Mike McDaniel coach of the year 20-1? Because if they're going over 9.5, if they're winning this division, if they're in the conversation for the 1 seed, then just like you said, like, McDaniel's the shoe in, and he would have gotten more consideration last year if Tua stayed healthy. And really, he got a lot of the blame for the medical staff clearing Tua and getting a second concussion, which was kind of strange. But I guess ultimately he's the head decision maker, so it falls on his shoulders. But yeah, I mean, if Tua plays 17 games this season, the Dolphins are very, very live to win the 1 seed in the AFC, and McDaniel is very, very live to be coach of the year. So 20-1 is a great number to have in pocket.
Yeah, and the other thing there too is that outside of, like, MVP is the only super, super serious award, along with maybe Defensive Player of the Year across some leagues. But with these other awards, it's largely like, who do people want to give it to? And there's enough of a justification. You could just tell with the media buzz around last season, the two guys that everyone really loved were Brian Daboll and Mike McDaniel. And then McDaniel kind of fell off and Daboll didn't. Well, Daboll did. He actually did fall off, but he still won it anyway. And so I think that is key, is that, you need to be, well, it definitely helps if you are liked, and then you can put up a resume that allows you to receive the award. Dolphins are high variance. This next team, I don't think very high variance at all. The New England Patriots, lowest win total in the division, which is 7.5, backed slightly under now, plus 235 to make the playoffs, plus 750 to win the AFC East. This is one of the more nondescript, unexciting playoff contending teams that I can imagine of recent vintage. Do you have any angle on the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, when we saw the schedule come out, and before we kind of got the sense that they have at least found some semblance of stability with the offensive scheme and play caller, I was very, very pessimistic that the Patriots were going to make a run for anything this year. And I think that is still the reality, because the schedule that they are facing is exceptionally difficult. And realistically, if this team is below 500 halfway through the season, is Mac Jones still the starter? Probably not. There is enough questions and issues swirling with the head coach quarterback chemistry there, that even if he is back towards progressing from what we saw as a rookie, because he's in a functional offense, if the team's not winning, there's going to be incentive to tank for a quarterback, in next year's draft that will take his place. And I think there are a handful of teams who otherwise are good enough to think we could be going to the playoffs this year, who may find themselves on the wrong side of, a difficult schedule, who make the decision to, well, let's go after one of these generational quarterbacks at the top of the draft then. And the Patriots are in that conversation. It's crazy. We've been talking AFC East now for almost half an hour. We've talked about 3 teams that I think realistically could win the Super Bowl this year, and the Patriots clearly are not. I do not think this team has the talent and skill, particularly the skill position players, to go toe to toe with the elite offenses in the AFC, even if they do find their way into the playoffs. And so realistically, is that a successful season? If you're Bill Belichick and you get in as a 7th seed and a really, really tight AFC, and then you get your doors blown off by the likes of the Bills, the Bengals, or the Chiefs in round 1 of the playoffs, like, are you going to feel like we're building something going forward? I just don't see it. I think there's much, much longer tail to the downside here, where this is a 3 or 4 win team on the basis of they're 2-6 or 2-7 around the halfway point, and they just decide, guess what, we're in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes here. We'll figure some stuff out next year. And really, the major issues outside of just the way that the offense has progressed in the 3 years we've seen Mac Jones as quarterback, or heading into the 3rd year here, is really just the decision making about wide receiver room and the tight end room, paying a lot of guys a lot of money, and none of these players in particular stand out as true blue difference makers. So the difficulty of the division is really where it starts, but ultimately this is a roster that has too many holes and questions for me to be any kind of positive upside on.
Yeah, if they get DeAndre Hopkins, that might make them a little bit more interesting, but at the moment they're kind of aggressively uninteresting. I think that I mean, last year I was kind of higher on the Patriots for much of the season than I think consensus, just because it was still regressing back a bit to Mac Jones in 2021, where I thought he was excellent, and also had solid surface level numbers. And then also when he looked at the interception luck and drop catches, he should have been even better than he was. And then last year happens, and I thought that he'd maybe figured it out after he had that awesome performance against Minnesota in the Dome, and then kind of saw what other teams did to Minnesota's defense after that, and it was, not nearly as impressive after the fact. So yeah, with the Patriots, I think maybe some alt under downside. The only thing there is that they just have too much kind of solid talent across the defense mainly. And then there's enough on the offensive line that even if it is the Bailey Zappi show, are they going to be able to get to be bad enough? Maybe against that schedule. In terms of awards pricing, Matthew Judon, 50-1 Defensive Player of the Year. He's the only real, I think, candidate. Christian Gonzalez, Defensive Rookie of the Year as well. But nothing super compelling on that front. Who do you think wins this division in the end?
In the end, I think it is going to be the Bills. And I'm probably going to be waiting for, and it's just because they have the best quarterback. Josh Allen's the best quarterback in this division, and it's by margin. And I think the name of the game for playing the AFC East this year is going to be planning your buy point on the Bills, and it will be contingent on halfway through the season, Josh Allen is still healthy, Stephon Diggs is still engaged, the defense is figuring things out, and the offensive line is not showing you massive regression from last season. If we kind of get to the point where the Bills are positioned well to build into a playoff run the way they were 2 years ago, then I think that's going to be your buy point to win the AFC East, and I would look for a price in the 3-1 range.
Yep, I think that is the right call. I think the Bills will win this division. I think at price, the Dolphins are probably the best bet at plus 290. In terms of the awards markets, I think that the best bets are around the Dolphins, as we talked about. Mike McDaniel, 21 Coach of the Year. Jalen Phillips, if you can get 100-1 Defensive Player of the Year. That is the team that I would be riding for upside. All right, before we get to the NBA draft, a reminder to download the RotoWorld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in the App Store today. All right, NBA draft. Happiest day of the year for some is around the corner. Unlike last year, not much suspense around the number one overall pick. Victor Wembanyama is minus 50,000, which is one of the great bets of all time, I think. We don't need to talk about the other players in that market. Where the draft starts really is at pick 2, where Brandon Miller had been the favorite. That has flipped now to Scoot Henderson being minus 145 to go second overall, with buzz swirling that a number of teams might be trading up for him, notably the New Orleans Pelicans with Zion Williamson on the table. And then Miller is the favorite to go third. Are you hearing anything about the number 2 overall pick?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was part of this, a little bit of the movement here. Obviously, somebody hit it much harder than I did, because Scoot Henderson was a big number to go number 2 last week. And it was really contingent on, the Draft Express from ESPN was kind of the guy beating the drum that Brandon Miller was the pick for the Hornets at 2 weeks ago, and then he pivoted on a dime middle of last week, and it's like, okay, well, you were the reason the market is where it is. So if you're changing your story, then clearly the market needs to be adjusted here. And some of that is ultimately that, the talent will weigh out, and the Hornets see the light of day and they realize this is the better player. Some of it is probably the potential that they deal that pick, and the only reason teams would trade up to the 2 would be to go for Scoot Henderson. I don't think anyone's giving away the farm or trading a blue chip player in order to get Brandon Miller. I mean, I'm assuming. So it's I don't know that for sure Charlotte's going to make that pick, but I agree that Henderson ought to be the favorite. Is that your opinion as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also at some point you just have to introduce some rationality into the market where it just seems like the consensus is Scoot Henderson is by far the better prospect than Brandon Miller, and certainly has a lot more superstar upside. And it seems like, yeah, there would be a number of teams who would be offering trade packages to go up to 2. The only question would be then if Charlotte, if they're actually going to take Miller at 2, and then teams would be trading up to 3 for Portland. But yeah, I think that Henderson will ultimately go second overall. In terms of picks 3 through 5, are you hearing anything? You made any bets in those markets?
I'm prepared now to fire a little bit on Ausar Thompson.
Yeah,
Am I even close?
possibly.
Ausar Thompson. I think more realistically, he's going to go 4 than Amen Thompson, based on what I'm hearing. And right now, you can get some pretty interesting head-to-heads where Asur is in the plus 250 range head-to-head against Amen. I think 3 is most likely Brandon Miller. I don't think there's a pretty clear tier at that, you kind of draw the line after Miller, and it's, kind of dealer's choice who you like the best between Thompson, Whitmore, Walker, maybe even Black is in the discussion. But yeah, Houston to me looks like they are going to go with the better of the shooters, which, as far as I can tell you, at least in terms of style, his ability to be coached into being a decent shooter, I think Ausar is the better of the 2. And so I think ultimately Houston goes in that direction. Cam Whitmore, top 5, likely, probably lands in Detroit, and then the rest of the top 10 could get a little squirrely, but I definitely think Anthony Black and Walker likely go in the top 8. Amen Thompson may be the faller. I think the way that I'm kind of laying out the picks in the top 8 here. Haven't really bet much until just recently because there just hasn't been a ton of liquidity this year. As of now, it's starting to change. So these markets are going to get violent today. I would watch things very closely for prices to start steaming out of range, because you can actually get a pretty decent bet down. I don't know if you've seen anything this morning, but there's some fun ways to try to capitalize right now.
Yeah, first draft in the post-Paolo world, where the market took down Woj. Let's close out by talking about Rookie of the Year, where Victor Wembanyama is minus 225. Scoot, second favorite, 4-1. Chet Holmgren, still a rookie. He's 5-1. And then Brandon Miller is plus 950. The market perhaps telling the Hornets that they should probably draft Scoot Henderson if he's there at 2. My read on this is that I just think Wembanyama should be minus 1,000. And I would not be backing anyone else in the market. I mean, from people I've spoken to around the league and everything that's just out there, it seems like Wembanyama is going to come into the league and like straight away be a top, conservatively a top 35 player in the league, maybe more optimistically a top 15 player in the league and a legitimate all-star from day one. And when you look at what he's done in the French league, which is not the most amazing league, clearly, but it's still a professional league and still a decent enough level of competition where what he's doing matters. And the fact that he was MVP, DPOY, and Rookie of the Year all in the same year, he's got an insane on-off. You look at his team's 2-point defense, it's just absolutely incredible. And I think that he is more NBA ready defensively, certainly, than most people, I think, perhaps give him credit for. And then I think he's going to get enough counting stats on offense, just like he did in France. So, and also, here's the thing with Rookie of the Year. This is the one award that really projects forward too. And if it's close between Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson, I think people are going to have it in their minds. Oh, did I vote for Victor Wembanyama, who went down as the 8th greatest basketball player of all time? Did I vote for him to win Rookie of the Year, or did I vote for Scoot Henderson, who ended up being a 2-time All-Star? I think that people are going to end up deferring to the greatness. And I think Wembanyama is largely just a bet on health. Okay. And here's the other thing with Rookie of the Year. You don't even really need health because of the nature of the year. He's going to play like 50 games, and then that should be enough to win. So I think Wembanyama, it's ridiculous to say that he hasn't even been drafted yet, and he's valued at minus 225. I think there's some minus 180 out there as well. But yeah, I think he should be the heavy favorite. What do you think?
I had an interesting conversation with someone who you know, and you were actually part of that conversation about who should be the MVP in the NBA next year. And just looking at the prices, the only one that made me kind of excited was Wembanyama MVP at 130 to 1. That's not crazy. Like, what if he plays more than the rest of the game? What if Embiid only plays 50 games? Jokic, takes his foot off the gas for the regular season next year. Like, Giannis is, over the hill or whatever. Like, there's a path for Wemby to be considered. So yeah, MVP 130 to 1 is kind of a fun flyer. But I guess let me ask you, strategy wise, timing wise, market entry wise, that number is not going to evaporate between now and the start of the regular season, right? Like, there's really no rush to lock up liquidity.
Probably not at minus 225. At the same time, if he lights up, well, it's going to be Sacramento Summer League, and maybe he gets to minus 300 or something. I think the minus 180, if you can find that, is a decent bet right now. But yeah, at minus 225, it's a bit hard to get too excited. Maybe parlayed into the Giants to win the NL West. It's a little bump. But yeah, I just don't think there's any parallel for this guy in the history of professional sports in America. Yeah. I mean, like, the parallel is Bryce Harper, I guess. The parallel is maybe Aaron Judge's rookie season, where he probably should have won MVP but didn't because he was a rookie and lost to Altuve, even though I think Judge probably deserved it. Obviously, the NBA is a different ball game, and more difficult for someone to just come in and win MVP, and I don't think he's going to do that. But certainly, when you're dealing with something that's never been seen before, which I think Wembanyama qualifies, this is the time to be betting outliers. And we don't have a lot of these markets yet, but I would, when they come open, I'm almost certainly going to be betting Wembanyama to make the All-Star team, to make All-NBA, for the Spurs to make the playoffs, for the Spurs to win 45-plus games, like stuff that, particularly with the last Spurs ones, probably not going to happen, but there's a lot of upside there. They also have a lot of cap space, so I wouldn't be surprised if Wembanyama is impacting winning more than people expect from day one. And we are done. Thank you, Drew Dinsick, for impacting winning today. And don't forget to check out NBCSportsEdge.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks, everyone, watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe to us. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll be back on Wednesday.